just one day before the New Hampshire primaries, a fake robocall and a voice likely generated to impersonate President Biden urged voters to stay home on Tuesday and to, quote, save your vote for the November election, end quote. After being alerted to the fake robocall, New Hampshire's Attorney General said it was, quote, an unlawful attempt to disrupt the New Hampshire presidential primary election and to suppress New Hampshire voters, end quote. And he issued a statement informing voters that the voice on the call was not President Biden and to disregard the message. New Hampshire's election law unit is investigating the origin of the call. It's not clear how many voters received the call, nor if any voters received that robocall, didn't check with the state attorney general's website, and decided not to vote as a result. And what if this were to happen just one day before the November election in a battleground state like Wisconsin, where the race is expected to be tight? The former New Hampshire Democratic Party chair, Kathleen Sullivan, whose complaint launched the investigation, said that, quote, these kind of tactics, if left unpunished, will only get worse in the future, end quote. AI Democracy Projects, founded by our next two guests, is working to try to counter the harmful effects of AI in our elections. And this week, the group held an expert panel on threats to election integrity posed by AI and tested leading AI tools with state and local election officials to help them identify AI-generated deepfakes and disinformation. Joining us now is Alondra Nelson, former Deputy Assistant Director of the White House Office of Science and Technology Policy. She's a member of the United Nations High-Level Advisory Body on Artificial Intelligence. Also joining us, Julia Angwin, an award-winning investigative journalist and New York Times contributor. She's a Media and Democracy Fellow at Harvard University and founder of a new nonprofit newsroom called Proof News. Welcome to both of you. Thank you for being with us. Alondra, let me ask you, it strikes me that a fake robocall is probably something we could have done 20 years ago. Doesn't feel like it feels like the low-hanging fruit of AI, but it might be the tip of the spear. Tell me what you worry about when you think about the damage that AI can do if not identified and regulated in this coming election.
Well, the things that AI is making possible are a lot faster, potentially, Ali, and also just the threshold, they're a lot easier to do. So you don't have to have a computer science degree, you don't have to be a computer coder to create a robocall and, disseminate it on social media or disseminate it through various kinds of digital channels. So, the sort of challenge that we face is the scale of the potential of the people that can do this.
So it's a little bit like social media, Julia. It's the velocity, it's the volume. A thing like a robocall, as a recipient of them from time to time, I inherently don't trust them. I'm never going to do anything a robocall tells me to do. But the danger is it could be other things. It could be asking questions about when election day is or where I vote. That could be misinformation. That could be more damaging. One of the things you point out is that there's nowhere in the country that AI is involved in the counting of votes. Is that correct?
Yes. I mean, right now the threat into elections from AI is not that the AI is going to be involved in any way in the ballot process, but it will be used for voter manipulation. And I think this Biden case is a perfect example of what people are afraid of, which is that it takes all you need to create a fake audio clip is 30 seconds of somebody's voice. So you could take it from a YouTube clip, or if they were on a podcast, you enter it onto this website. I did this with my own voice, and and then you type in what you want that voice to say, and my friends and family were convinced, right? It's a very convincing, extremely cheap. I think it cost me $11 to sign up for a high-powered subscription. So I think the problem is that their voters are going to be overwhelmed with information that they can't trust. The fact that AI exists actually raises questions about truthful information too, right? So it leads to this ultimate truth decay where no one knows what to believe.
Alondra, one of the issues, of course, is that in the last election, Donald Trump used, and his associates used imagery out of context to indicate that people were stealing ballots or they were doing things, they were passing things. In truth, you can use AI to create a situation which then is distributed to the media or wherever in social media that indicates that nefarious things are going on, even if they weren't going on, and to undermine people's trust, basically, in the system.
Right. So the challenge that we face is just sort of wide-ranging uncertainty all around, and that's the thing that keeps people from going to the polls, right? So, we had bipartisan election officials with us yesterday in New York City, testing some of these, including the voice cloning technology that's from 11 Labs that we think might be the source of this New Hampshire robocall. And what was clear is that it is the potential bad information, whether or not it's caused by malign actors, whether or not it's caused by somebody that's just sort of messing around with the new technology. And we were able to show the election officials how easy it was actually to make, as Julia said, this kind of call. So, we're facing an election in which I think a lot of the same kinds of concerns that would have existed 4 years ago or 8 years ago around bad information, misinformation, and the like are still going to be around us. But the intensification, your word, Ali, the velocity of it is the thing that we've really got to watch and be mindful of. And we also need to, I think, it's a kind of all hands on deck moment. And a lot of this will fall with the companies. So the companies are saying, OpenAI 10 days ago or so released some guidelines about how it was going to be engaged in making sure there was election integrity. And it's not clear how these things are going to be enforced. So yesterday in the testing, we tested 5 models, 2 open source, OpenAI, Meta, Anthropic, Mistral, which is a French model, and a couple of other besides. And some of them were okay. I mean, some of the election officials thought, gosh, this is pretty good. This is as good as my team would have kicked out. Some of the information was not great, but it's being circulated. And the frustration I think that people might experience if you get the wrong address for your polling site, if you're told the wrong information about whether or not you need voter ID to vote, and you have to go back and try to get the information, that kind of bad information is also really insidious and will keep people from voting and frustrate their efforts to exercise their right to vote.
Julie, another angle that bad actors took in the last election was to suggest the penetration of our technological systems for counting votes. And what we were able to hear from is people within the Trump administration who were responsible for maintaining these systems coming out and saying, no, nothing was compromised. We actually have ways of making sure that our systems were not attacked, they were not victims of cyber attacks. Do we have ways of saying that? Obviously, you said that AI is not involved in any voting, but do we have ways to say, here's how we go after bad actors in the AI space who will sow the distrust that Alondra was talking about, or create mayhem in our electoral process? Do the laws and regulations even exist?
Well, there are actually multiple states that are passing laws right now to basically regulate or criminalize the use of deepfakes or AI in the election context. And so I think there are a lot of states that are trying to make these efforts, but the problem is actually identifying it and attributing it. This is actually the same problem you have with cybersecurity. It's a good comparison you made, because you can't often tell if something is AI. We actually did a quiz with all our election officials, showed them images that were real and fake, and I got them all wrong, they got them all wrong. Like, seriously, everybody got it all wrong, because the AI is really good at images, particularly, and at voice. They're not as great at video yet. And so we don't really have a great detection system. And then once you have detection, it's actually really hard to figure out who made it. You need a free account basically to make any one of these things. And so by the time you kind of trace it back, someone could have made 10 more. And so I think we're in a challenging situation where, I think it's great that people are trying to figure out a way to address it through policy, but I also think we need more facts on the ground, which is why we have just committed and started this project to do continuous testing. So we're going to be continuously trying to test these systems to see if the guardrails that they have said they're going to put in place are actually in place.
We're going to open a conversation. Yeah, go ahead, Alondra.
Yeah, no, I was just going to say, the challenge that we face with laws and regulations, which we desperately need in this space, is that you often can't do them until after you've traced and figured out what happened, who did it, and then you can, exercise the law. And by that point, we could have had lots of harm, and the way that people are thinking about election outcomes, there could be sort of chaos around election information. And so we've got to have both proactive and reactive, and not only reactive ways of doing this. And some of the proactive sits with the companies. They say you're not supposed to be able to use these to copy the voice of Joe Biden, for example. That's actually against the actually terms of service and terms of use for many of these companies. And they need to be enforcing that. It can't be left to all of us to enforce it. Part of what we really took away yesterday from this extraordinary group of bipartisan election officials was also that people need to, I think, go back to that original source of information. These election officials are doing tabletop exercises. They're thinking of every possible scenario that might be putting elections at risk, and they are ready. They're getting their websites ready. They're getting, their response, their quick response teams ready as well. And so go to those election officials as your first source of information, I think, before you turn to a chatbot.
Good. Really good piece of advice. I wanted to take away to say, how do I keep safe in an election? Very good piece of advice. And we're going to, I think, have to reach out and let our viewers know how you do that. Who do you go to find out what you need to know? Thank you for that. Thank you to both of you for the work that you're doing on this, Alondra Nelson and Julia Angwin. Coming up, Ukrainian President Volodymyr Zelensky is calling Donald Trump's bluff.